Hello everybody, Chris here. Today I want to talk about sort of a controversial topic. Which game is harder, Dead by Daylight or VHS? I know there's going to be a lot of discussion here, so I'm going to try to keep it as uncontroversial as possible. I will just tell you what my thoughts are and my reasoning behind it, and then we can discuss it further in the comments. And I will just say it right away. Whenever we have a discussion between Dead by Daylight and VHS, I try to keep it as civil as possible, and I try to put logical thinking behind everything that I say. A lot of people in the comments just write things based off their feelings, which I don't think is right. If you're just gonna say things because you think it's smart, without actually providing any proof, just don't. Anyway, let's begin. Okay, so which game is gonna be harder and which game is gonna be easier in the beginning? I played Dead by Daylight so far, so I know what I'm saying here. Dead by Daylight is extremely hard for newcomers. Killers are extremely overpowered in the beginning, even though that kind of balances out towards the intermediate stages of the game, and then the power sort of shifts toward survivor side the further you go into the game. The problem with being a survivor in the very beginning is they don't give you enough information in the tutorial. There's a bunch of question marks you're left with once you get inside of the game. What are flashlights, how to use them, what perks should I start with, what's gonna help me. Like, they just made it so complicated for newcomers that it takes time to adjust. You have to watch a bunch of YouTube videos, and it kind of does make it really interesting on beginner survivors because of that reason, but it's only interesting if you have friends to play with who can explain the game to you. If you get inside of a solo queue game right in the beginning without knowing anything, the only thing you did is a tutorial, you didn't watch any videos, you get inside of the game, you will have a really hard time. And we can only blame behavior for this, they just didn't provide enough info. If you play a killer, you just have less to know in your first game. Tutorial pretty much covers almost everything. Unless you get matched up against really good veteran survivors, then yeah, you will have a hard time. But we're just making a scenario here, beginner survivor players versus beginner killer players. Killer is gonna have an easier time, but even with killer, they just don't explain to you everything. From what we got so far, we figured out that Dead by Daylight is sort of a really hard game to play in the very beginning, just because you are not educated well enough. If they gave you more information in the start, you would probably have a much easier time playing the game, but even then that would just drop it from like really high difficulty to sort of a like in between medium and high. But I already said it. For killer, it's gonna be really fun because they will feel strong, and for survivor, just because you can play with friends, you're gonna be figuring things out and you're just gonna go from game to game, watch some YouTube videos, and you're gonna be slowly getting better. Let's talk about VHS now. I feel like VHS is gonna be much easier for newcomers because they explain everything pretty well. Most of us don't even have the game yet, and we already know so much. The lobby seems pretty simple. You go into the weapons tab, you can see the crafting time, you can see the ammunition. You go into the teens page, you can see everything about them. You go to the monsters page, the powers are explained. The thing is, with VHS, you will just have to progress to unlock certain things. So in the very beginning, you're stuck with very base things. And if you just scroll around the game a little bit before you actually get in your first match, you will get all the info that you need, which will already make the experience much easier on you. However, once you get inside of the match, on the teen side, you do have weapons that are really hard to use, and you might make a mistake without doing research, you know, going for a shock sphere or something, which is pretty hard to control, and I feel like that can kind of make the experience a little bit dull, but it's still definitely easier than being a survivor in Dead by Daylight for the first time. I feel like the monster side is a bit easier than teen side in VHS, just because you have your free powers. You don't have any mutations in the beginning. You have free powers and you need to work around those. You need to figure out how to use them, and I feel like just in the first match you can already see what's it about. Unless you play the Doll Master, which will probably get you killed in the first game. So I would say for VHS in the beginning stage, with everything being so well explained, the game difficulty is probably going to be between, I would say in between low, intermediate and regular intermediate. So in the very beginning stages of VHS and Dead by Daylight, I have to say VHS is easier to play. I'm gonna put you in a scenario where you have 1000+ hours and you focused on one role mainly. Like, let's say 90+% of the time you spent on one role. So let's say survivor versus teen. If you played a survivor for 1000+ hours in Dead by Daylight, you managed to figure out looping, flashlights, how to prolong chases, how to manage yourself well. You know, you will obviously do gens already well enough because it's a really stale mechanic mechanic that doesn't get any harder, and it takes probably like 20 hours of practice to get really good at. So let's say you know how to manage yourself around the gens, you know how to save people, when to save people, and let's even say you kind of became decent at 316, so you can pull it off every now and then, you can do flashlight save every now and then, because with 1000+ hours, trust me, talking from experience, yeah, you can get decent to even really good with all of those things. Now the thing is, you reached rank 1, you cannot rank up anymore, it just became stale. Because of the poor matchmaking, you never know who you're gonna go up against, but let's say everybody in the match is similar skill level to you, both killer and your teammates, I would say this is where it gets sort of intermediate. You're gonna have a hard time every now and then, but most of the matches are just gonna be, you know, you doing gens, saving your teammates, running the killer, and I wouldn't even say it's all that hard anymore. This is exactly why I kinda got bored of it, because it stopped being challenging for me. Every match now is sort of like in between easy to intermediate, and you don't even have anything to work for anymore. You reach the max rank, the matches are kind of the same, and there's not a lot more you can learn. You can just get a little bit better at flashlight saving, better at looping, and 316. Now if you look at teen in VHS, I've seen matches with developers who have 1000+ hours in the game, and it just seems like there is still a lot more to learn, because there's just so many game mechanics. You have 12 weapons, there's gonna be plenty more in the future. You have 5 modifications on each of those weapons. You have those perk combinations, which means that you can master a lot of different builds, unlike in W.A.R.T, because you have meta builds that you're going to be running all the time. It's like 20 to 25 perks that you're going to be switching constantly. In VHS, with only 5 characters, you already have options, because the perks are really balanced. There is no meta perks, they're just here to help you. They're not a necessity. So you can build whatever you want, then you can like get good with one build, you can get good with another build, then you can switch to weapons. I want to get really good with this weapon, and then this weapon, and then I just want to find my own playstyle. Then I want to switch up between modifications and so forth and so forth. You just have so much to learn. And the biggest problem is because the monster has similar options, they can add mutations to their power. So even if you run into the same monster over and over again, you will have to adjust every time. They might have a different mutation, which means their playstyle is completely different, which in conclusion would mean that the more you play the game, the harder it gets. This is the exact reason why I'm excited about the game. And it's kind of the same for the other side. If you're playing W.A.R.T as a killer main, 1000+ hours, you'll learn most of the mechanics in those 1000 hours. Yes, you have different killers and you can switch up between them, and that is what makes the game really interesting for killer mains. But if you're a survivor main, you kind of just drop off after 1000+ hours. If you switch to killer, you play one killer for like what, 300 hours, you master it, you can just switch the killer because they're hella different, they have different abilities, you can make different builds with them. And yes, it can still be really hard for you if you get on a new killer in a really high rank. So I gotta say that the killer side is definitely more interesting in W.A.R.T, and it can be harder in high rank, but it doesn't have to be. If you're playing with your main killer and you already pretty much know how survivors are gonna play, because everybody plays basically the same. If you want to get good at looping, patterns are always gonna be similar between killers and survivors. But now if you look at VHS, for monster is the same thing as with teens. Even after you master one thing, you always have something else. You can try a different mutation, you can switch up the monster, but let's say you're playing one monster, one build. You are gonna have to adjust every single match. There is 4 teens, even if they're the same ones as in the previous matches. What if they switched up weapons they use? Or what if they switched modifications they use? You will have to adjust because their playstyle might be completely different. And let's not even start talking about like how different it's gonna be if you just keep on running into different teens. So in conclusion, I would say that in the very beginning, VHS is much easier than W.A.R.T is, just because of the sheer knowledge they give you. And I feel like your objective is more straightforward and clear. But the more you play, the more you rank up. VHS definitely spikes up in that difficulty level, whilst W.A.R.T kind of declines. And yeah, that's just my thought processing. If you guys don't agree with something, that's fine. You can let me know down below in the comment. If you have anything to add, anything to discuss, comment section is wide open, use it as you will. And if you found the video enjoyable, please consider smashing that like button below, it really does help a lot. And if you don't want to miss out on any future videos that I'll be releasing, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. All that being said, wishing you all a beautiful evening, and I guess I'll see you in the next one. See you.